Bonjour à tous. Donc, je m'appelle Élodie et je fais partie du comité de programmation de la CSPC. Et de ce fait, il me fait plaisir de vous introduire la session plénière d'aujourd'hui, la première journée de notre belle conférence 2023, qui est intitulée « La science en temps de conflit, comment soutenir et limiter l'impact ». Donc, c'est une merveilleuse session plénière qui est organisée par le FRQ. Et puis, nous allons vous encourager à tweeter sur vos événements et vos panels préférés en mentionnant le @Science Policy et le hashtag CSPC 2023. Enfin, n'oubliez pas de remplir le questionnaire d'évaluation sur cette session plénière pour pouvoir nous donner un peu de feedback qui nous est très pertinent pour améliorer de façon constante notre conférence annuelle. J'espère que vous apprécierez énormément ce panel. Je vais faire une petite introduction en anglais et je passe la parole à Monsieur Lebel. Donc, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elodie. I am part of the CSPC's program committee, and as such, it is my pleasure to introduce the next plenary session titled Science in Times of Conflict, How to Limit the Impact, and it is organized by the FRQ. Please feel free to tweet about your favorite moments and events for this first day of our beloved conference while using the @SciencePolicy and hashtag CSPC 2023. Lastly, please remember to fill out the evaluation survey concerning this specific plenary session. It is very useful for us to be able to continuously improve our yearly conference. Lastly, I very much hope you will enjoy this session, and I leave you in the great hands of Monsieur Jean Lebel.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Can you hear me well? Yeah, okay. The microphone is working well. Bonsoir, bonne fin d'après-midi, bonjour, good afternoon, good early evening, cabaret. It's a privilege to speak in between the last session and the cocktail for the French science. Alors, some of my intervention will be in French. And there's simultaneous translation. You can get a device outside if you're not confident with one or the other of the official language of Canada. C'est un plaisir pour moi ici de parler de science en temps de conflit. J'ai présidé le CRDI, le Centre de recherche et développement, durant 10 ans. J'y ai travaillé 26 ans. J'ai fait face à de nombreuses situations. Mais maintenant, je suis à l'Institut de la francophonie pour le développement durable, au Conseil d'orientation, et je tiens à remercier Rémi Quirion, le scientifique en chef des Fonds de recherche du Québec, pour avoir organisé, m'avoir demandé de modérer ce panel. Et ce panel ne vise qu'un seul but: élargir les perspectives, donner une perspective d'ici et d'ailleurs sur la science en temps de conflit. So it's a privilege to be here, thanks to the Chief Scientist of Quebec, Rémi Quirion, who is with us tonight in the room, that has graciously asked me to moderate this panel. I've been president of IDRC for 10 years. I'm now chairing the board of the Institut de Francophonie et Développement Durable. And it's a privilege for me to be able just to do one thing this afternoon: broaden the perspective on conflict, science, and with views from here and from abroad. And I'm saying abroad because we're supposed to have Ancier online. And Julie, I'm looking at you. Is she with us? We have a researcher in exile from Iran that is currently in Germany. And that is a fantastic story to tell, so I don't see her on screen. Is she there? Ancier, good afternoon.
I'm with you. Bon après-midi.
Okay, good. So the panel will run as follows. Fairly straightforward, okay? A very brief introduction from me. Then we have a set of 3 questions that we're going to ask the panelists, and then we're going to flip it to you. So stand ready with your question, your observation, and your own perspective of science and conflict. We'll be ready to listen, and our panelists will be ready also to answer in one of the 2 languages of this country. So let me introduce our guest panelists, all expert in the field. On the screen, you have Ancier Erfani, who is a scientific at the International Center for Theoretical Physics. She is from Iran and served as assistant professor of physics at the Institute for Advanced Study in Basic Science in Iran from December 2015 until her resignation in September 2022 in support of protests. She is now an exiled scholar and will have pretty much a lot of say about the difficulty, but also the reward that you get in this situation. She is also the co-chair of the Preservation of Science Task Team in the Science in Exile project at the World Academy of Science. Welcome, Encier.
Thank you.
Left to me is Carole Jabet, qui est la directrice scientifique de Fonds de recherche du Québec Santé. Elle a été une ingénieure dans sa plus jeune incarnation à l'École centrale de Lyon. Elle a un doctorat en molecular biophysics, en biophysique moléculaire de l'École centrale de Paris, et elle a fait un postdoc à Biophysics Department à Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. Elle amène ici une perspective assez intéressante, une perspective du FRQ, particulièrement avec son expérience, mais aussi le programme Sciences en exil, dont elle saura certainement nous parler. À côté de Carole, il y a Myria Tridge, qui est professeure de droit constitutionnel et de droit international des droits de la personne au département des sciences juridiques de l'Université du Québec à Montréal, l'UQAM, mon alma mater. She's the co-chair of the Scholar at Risk on the Canadian National Steering Committee. And as part of her research, Professor Trish has collaborated with numerous human rights organizations focusing in particular on the right and protection of human rights defenders. Welcome, Myria.
Merci.
And last but not least, Carly Kuhu, Professor of History and Canada Research Chair in Atlantic Canada Communities at St. Mary's University in Halifax, Nova Scotia. She specialized in religious minority migration in the 18th and early 19th centuries. And she has been working to support the integration of displaced and refugee and exile scientists, serving currently on the International Science Council Freedom and Responsibility in Science Standing Committee and the Science and Exile Steering Committee. She co-founded the Royal Society of Edinburgh Young Academy of Scotland's At-Risk and Refugee Academic Program, co-founded the Global Young Academy at Risk Scholar Initiative, and founded the Royal Society of Canada College of New Scholar Artists and Scientists at Risk and Displaced Academic and Artists Program. Wow, that's a lot of ground. So you have the bio of these panelists that are with us, and today we're going to talk very, succinctly, but probably with a lot of experience and example of a world that is changing. And when we think of conflict, most of us, are going to make reference to the news, the Hamas-Israel conflict or the Ukraine-Russia conflict. But we have to expand a little bit beyond those conflicts. And we have to talk of science not only in terms of my research, but we have to talk of science in terms of teaching, of collaborating, and of financing in terms of conflicts. And these conflicts, whether they are armed or unarmed, have a lot of implication. If they are armed, they put, obviously, your security at risk. Or sometimes they are a protective factor. I remember very well in Lebanon, the only place that was not bombarded during the war was the American University in Beirut. It was considered as a space not to touch. People don't recall these things, but it's not always destructing. It's also protecting in a situation of conflict. But it's also putting you at risk. Look at the number of people that only speaks and then get jailed or get simply, coerced and are forced to stay quiet and cannot engage in science that they would like. During the Pinochet regime in Chile, I remember very well Ricardo Lagos, who has been a president, was in exile and nobody was funding research for economic science in Chile during the hardship of the dictatorship. It was through IDRC, my previous organization, that funded were provided to continue make ID alive, like he was saying. But it's not only these dramatic situations. Think about the way education is prioritized by some country. How much money flows to research? How much money flows to university? What can be done there? Think about other situations. Climate change, migration, forced migration. All of these have tremendous impact on science community and their family. And not to talk COVID. So, think today about those conflicts that goes beyond the armed conflict. Think about the fact that this is not only impacting the researcher or their institution, it might impact also the future of the country and the capacity to bounce back, the resilience of those countries. And in time of conflict, there's also the family. What happens? When these researchers, are either invited or granted, some resources to come to our country or other country in exile. All of this made the fact that, researcher in exile and research in exile will be the main topic of the panel today. In the conversation, we will try to figure out, are they good story? Or do you have good story? Or are they really blind spot? Or a thing that we're clapping ourselves in the hands for doing, but maybe that's not that effective, or that has not the success that it was supposed to have. Enough said for me. I've taken a lot of airspace, and I'm moving now to our panelists. And Ansi, I'll start with you in Germany. I know it's late. But, give us a little bit of a story for the audience over here to warm them up about why it's so important to talk of this research and its impact in situation of conflict. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about your life story.
Yeah, thank you so very much, Jean, for giving me the floor. I'm really happy to be with you, although virtually. The point is that before becoming in this situation, as you mentioned, I was collaborating with a project called Science and Exile, which was the joint project of the International Science Council, the Roosevelt Academy of the Sciences, and also the Inter-Academy Partnership, which I'm also a member of all these organizations. And those days in 2020, 21, I was supposing that I'm doing a really great job by helping the scientists that they are in exile because of the conflicts. Those days, the focus was in Afghanistan because I had an experience being in Afghanistan, planning a workshop there with the help of the UNESCO and then with the help of the ICTP. But to be honest, I could never imagine that. How could be a life of a scientist in exile? And I could never imagine that a simple reaction of the resignation in support of my people who did the protest last September in the Women's Life Freedom protest will lead me also to take that decision. When I took that decision, I was in a sabbatical leave for a research issue in Mexico. And I just packed my luggage just for 3 months to be there and come back home and then following my duties. But when the death of Mahsa Amini happened and I realized that I should do something, and the only reaction that I could do being far from home was just resignation, because I didn't really want to work for the regime anymore. And I could not imagine that just in less than 12 hours, my family will be threatened in Iran by the intelligence service of the regime. And I realized that, okay, the call that my family received in Iran means that I should cancel my flight back home because that will be more dangerous. And then I started to be like more human activists, trying to do the humanitarian activities in support of the suppressions that they are happening inside of the University of Iran, and still am continuing that. So you can never imagine that as a scientist, how life could be changed for you. For example, now I have a friend now who is living in Gaza, and we are really worried about his life because it's almost a week that he's not even receiving our messages in Gaza because there is no internet. So you cannot imagine that how life can change for you as a scientist, that you don't want to save your science, you just want to save your life. And you imagine that the only carrier that you know is science, and you are expecting that scientific community help you to save your life. And I will tell you about that experiences, that how organizations that support scientists in exile can help a lot to really facilitate this process and make it shorter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antje. It's very important to realize in what you were saying that, you know, this situation that has led in Iran, the situation in Iran that has led you to be now in Germany, seems to be forgotten often in our hemisphere because other things are picking up. You know, right now, if you're talking to the vast majority of people about Iran, there's a lot of people that don't recall at all, you know, the gender-based violence that happened. Everyone is talking about, you know, the connection between the Hamas and Iran. But these conflicts are long-lasting and rooted in some region. They need to be considered in order to succeed with program. Carole, et vous? Et vous en français, en anglais, quelle serait votre anecdote qui vous porte à cette attention à la science en situation de conflit?
D'abord, merci de l'invitation. La question est vaste et la question est à la fois professionnelle et personnelle. Je pense comme la plupart d'entre nous. Je vais commencer en français, je changerai en anglais un peu plus tard, mais je pense qu'il faut d'abord honorer la science en français. Ça fait aussi partie du bagage qu'on véhicule au FRQ. Et les FRQ sont la première partie de ce qui n'est pas une anecdote, mais ce qui est ce que je crois les fonds ont réussi à construire. J'ai rejoint l'organisation il y a presque 5 ans maintenant, et j'ai rejoint une organisation dans laquelle on parle de diplomatie scientifique. Et pour moi, c'était un éveil, avant même d'être un réveil, de considérer, de réfléchir que la science a un rôle dans la diplomatie de la même manière que la diplomatie doit embrasser le fait scientifique pour être complète. So I think that this scientific diplomacy was this first thing that made me think, okay, I not only have to find the right program to fund research, I also have to think about how we can use research to make a better world, not only because we try to find some solutions, specific solution to some issues, but also to some political issues, as it was said by Antje. And of course, I'm a European person, I'm a French person, a French citizen, I'm also a Canadian citizen. So when the conflict between Ukraine and Russia came in 2022, I just faced the feeling I had when I grew up, and I grew up with some sort of fear of how damageable it can be to be exposed to war. And so I have to say, okay, I'm lucky enough to be in an organization where we consider scientific diplomacy. I know that we have to find, as a person, any ways to really fight conflict, wars. What can I do? And this is where I was again lucky enough to find some mentors, and a boss that I proposed him. What can we do? And Rémi Quirion said, whatever you want to do, just figure out, find a program, and we will see what we can do.
He's a good boss.
He's a very good boss for this. I know he's in the room, so of course I'm going to say he's a very good boss. It's too easy. I mean, I remember I sent him an email on a Sunday morning saying we have to find a way, and he said, okay, just draw me a program and we were able to do it. But it was not the first one. I will be able to come back on this, but I also, as I said, I joined an organization where scientific diplomacy was high in the priorities. And we already had some programs.
Yeah.
We had some program with Palestine. We had some program with some other parts in the world. So it was easy for me to jump in
And
this.
we'll come back to this right in the next round. Mirya, human rights at the heart of your research interests. You've been working in numbers of different places filled with different type of conflict. What is the anecdote here that, really captured your attention and made a career out of it?
Thank you, merci beaucoup. I'm going to start in English and maybe switch over to French a little bit later. So, yeah, there's a link with my work as a researcher. I do research, action research in the field of human rights, meaning that for the last 15 years, I've been doing research projects for the promotion and protection of human rights in collaboration with human rights defenders all over the world. And I would say that about 7 to 8 years ago, I noticed that our partner organizations, or the human rights defenders that we work with, increasingly actually became the victims of human rights violations themselves, meaning they became the targets of repression, of intimidation, of false accusations. And, I knew that defending human rights is a dangerous job, but that was sort of the first time that I witnessed that firsthand, and this was independent of the issue at stake. Really, the common denominator was that they spoke out, they denounced, they criticized, they held the government accountable. And then in 2018, I think UQAM became a member of the Scholars at Risk network, and we held a conference at UQAM to launch the membership, and we invited a researcher from Syria, Anadi Ibrahim, who was a scholar at risk at Western University and at Simon Fraser in Vancouver. And she has a PhD in bioanalytical chemistry. Not necessarily somebody you would suspect to be the target of, or for her research. As far as I knew, chemistry does not necessarily involve criticizing the government. And yet she became the target, and she had to flee the country. So what I learned at that moment is that researchers, just like human rights defenders, they are considered a threat per se to many authoritarian regimes or in countries that are in conflict. So, because of their knowledge, because of their standing, because of their impact as educators, especially, they are considered threatening. And so to this day, I sort of work on those two fronts, protection of human rights defenders and the protection of scholars at risk. And sometimes, they go hand in hand. Some human rights defenders are also scholars, and some scholars are also human rights defenders. So there's the overlap.
Merci beaucoup, Mirya. Et on va passer à Carly. Carly, what is yours? The anecdote, that made you work on the topic that, involve, migrants coming from Europe to Canada in the 18th, 19th century, but now has taken, much broader amplitude.
Yeah, thank you. The research background actually got me invited to a workshop in Amsterdam in 2015, which brought together a lot of academic experts in various fields who dealt with migration in some way. And we've all been at conferences where you have brilliant people in the room and they all talk, and you leave and you're really worried that nothing is actually going to come out of it. And so when I was flying, I was in Scotland at the time. I was a member of the Young Academy of Scotland, and I thought, I don't want to leave this conference and nothing happen, and so what can I do in the world that I understand and that world was research. And I was in a very privileged position because I was co-chair of the Young Academy of Scotland. And I thought, well, if I was a displaced researcher, what would it feel like? And then there must be colleagues in Scotland who want a connection to the academic world, but they don't know how to get it. And we could possibly create something that would allow them access. And so for me, it was wanting to make sure that colleagues who were committed to research like I was were able to continue with that. And I went to the president of the Royal Society of Edinburgh at the time was Jocelyn Bell Burnell, and she was amazing. And she was enormously supportive from the beginning. And we had unanimous support from all of the members from the Royal Society of Edinburgh to just go forward with this. And so for me, it was not wanting to not do something.
So a call that was really
A call and
from within.
and a frustration with sometimes the way academia can be.
Yeah.
We can talk about a lot of things, but what are the actions? So I wanted an action.
So you're giving me the segue to continue with you, because, I told you that I didn't know what was the order of speaking, but is this receiving the proper attention? I asked you a bit earlier this, Carole. And in your university, do you feel that the university is a line between your thinking and the situation that is happening in conflict situation and what they are doing? Tell me about positive, negative outcomes. What is your learning here?
Well, my university is because I'm there. I don't know if it's hard because I come from a really small university, so they have to make really crucial decisions about where resources go. But they've been tremendously supportive. I think at the international level, there have been a lot of important positive changes that I've seen over the period that I've been doing this. When we started with the Young Academy of Scotland, we actually wrote to every senior science academy in the world asking them to help us. We got one reply.
Wow.
I think today we would get a lot more. And I think that's a testament to people kind of recognizing that there are strength in numbers, but also there are more and more conflicts happening and there are more and more displaced colleagues around the world. And it feels like among academics and faculty members, once they know what's going on, because many people don't know about this at all, but once they know about it, I have never felt anything but tremendous support. Like, what can we do? So I've seen a lot of positives. What I think is maybe we still need to work on is some kind of uniformity where colleagues who are displaced actually know where to go. Because there are so many things now spiraling. There doesn't seem to be coordination. There also isn't enough resource.
We're going to come back to this, but there's one thing I'd like to hear, because I've seen so often in universities hesitation about researchers that are coming from other countries, and particularly countries that are not, part of, the world that we know. And this is an incredible asset for an organization. And I'd like, at one point to hear a little bit more, or maybe pass the baton to Ancia, because Ancia is not with us tonight because she didn't get the visa. Very simple. Ancia, up to you with the same question. What is, where you are currently and what you have been through, the type of support that is positive or having some, challenges for you, and what is your learning?
Going to my experience, as I said, I was familiar with organizations that are helping the scientists in exile. There are really few of them. For example, the Scholar Rescue Fund, Scholars at Risk, CARA, which is the Commission for At-Risk Scholars in England, and the other one is the PAUSE, who you should find a host institute in France. And I experienced all of these when I was collaborating with the Science Exile Project. And the point is that I was really familiar with these organizations. Imagine that you have a scholar who become at risk because of any conflict that you can imagine, and he or she is not aware of such kind of organizations. So in that critical point, how that person can find a place to be really good. I was lucky somehow that saying, okay, I know them, they know also me very well because I collaborated with these people. And I just get wondered that when I wanted to prove that I'm at risk, just because of the resignation, because some people suppose it as a joke, because they said that high resignation can lead to become exiled. So it was really difficult, even now, to convince people, okay, I'm coming from a country which is not a democratic one, the protests happen and all these things. Even some people cannot believe you. And imagine that how you can prove this to the organizations that they are doing that. And then they are asking several questions to be really convinced that as a scholar at risk, if they are going to suppose you, that you will not be able to come back home. And if you also come back home, your life will not be in danger, but probably you will not be able just to find a job. So it's really, really complicated situation. So you should prove that you are in this situation. You should find a host institute. So finding a host institute is not an easy process because, as I said, some of the programs are localized in a specific country. So you should really find an institute that can have as much as overlap with your scientific issue because you don't want to lose your scientific background and you really want to continue your science. So it's really difficult to find in programs that they are specified in such kind of the issue. For example, SAR is just supporting the ones with the von Humboldt Foundation from Germany, PAUS supporting the ones in France. But one point that I really find it was really positive regarding PAUS that I realized is that when you apply for PAUS and when your application approved, they have a connection with the embassies. So they contact embassies to get you the appointment really urgently. And of course, the process of the visa will be really fast because they have a special program for talented scholars. So they put you in that category and then they can issue the visa really as fast as possible, let's say in 2 weeks. But for example, when I applied for a visitorship position that now I have in Germany for 6 months, I applied it in May and I got my visitorship position, my visa after 3 months. And the embassy issued it for 3 months because they said, okay, your invitation letter was for 6 months and already 3 months of that passed. And although I put in my application, my interviews, even one of them was in German, to convince these people, okay, my life is in danger, but they never pay attention to that. So there is a solution, as a science diplomacy, as Carol said, I know that the diplomacy the policy issue could be really slow. But if you be planned properly, as what the PAUS program had done, the scientist who is in really critical situation at least can have a faster process of having, visa issue. And also they have the organizations with different disciplines that if you cannot find a proper place to go, they help you to find a host institute. Which most of the institutes, they don't do it because they don't have a category of the institutions that they can help scientists at risk. So which is one of the main issues. As Carly mentioned, one of the problems is that most of the scientific community, they are not aware of the situation of the at-risk scholars or being a scientist in the case of the refugee condition or displaced. So that's why they don't know how to help these people. When these people contact them saying, okay, I'm looking for a host institute, even the budget will come from another organization in supporting these people. So they don't know how they should deal with these things because in most of the cases, they see it as a political problem. I said, okay, we don't want extra headache by accepting someone who has problems of the policy or some such kind of the things. And that's why maybe they don't collaborate, even if they don't want to invest budget on that. So even when everything is free for them and they just need to give a office place for that person, not more than that, but they don't collaborate with these organizations. So one of the problems is the budget, of course, that these institutes are really few. And of course, the other issue is that there are few host institutes, and the other process is the visa issue that could take longer, especially maybe you don't even have your proper documents with yourself because you are displaced, and you are not in a safe condition to wait for a long time.
Thank you, Antje. And many of the answer that has been given by you all talked a little bit, or some of you, science diplomacy. And, I've heard science diplomacy in the opening panel, and I'm a little bit hesitant to get into the science diplomacy because sometimes what I really hear is more about, a form of colonialism. You know, we bring, we keep, we host, and what are we really building in terms of linkage with the host institution of the researcher that is in exile or the country, if ever there is a regularization of the situation? And Carole, I'm turning to you because you have, you know, at FRQ, you mentioned the experience of these programs. So tell me about how you do it to make it work both ways, you know, for the researcher, for us in Canada, but also thinking about the longer term.
Yeah, so maybe I'm going to be a little bit long, but I think that we need to understand what is the content of the Science in Exile program. And so first, it's a program that corresponds exactly to the mission of the FRQ. And that's a very important step as a beginning. So our mission is really to build research capacity for the Quebec province. And the way that we want to build research capacity is by supporting our own students, own researchers, own institutions, but it's also by building collaboration at the international level. And so keep this in mind. We build international collaboration. So, and this is the way that we were designing this program, first thing. The second intent was to keep in a safe place international students and international researchers already being in the Canada soil when the Ukraine war was starting, but after this, any type of crisis. So it was, okay, you're here in Canada, you're here in the Quebec province, what can we do to support you? Because we understand you cannot return right now in your country. It doesn't mean that you will not never return. It's just now, okay? So there is a time frame here. So the first step of the program was just to continue the support we already provided to these people. After this, we said, okay, there are some people not being able to build the research capacity they should build in their country because of this crisis. We can welcome them for a while, not forever, okay? Time for them to continue their scientific work, and when the period will be better, they could come back, okay? So it was the second level of the program, welcome some students and welcome some researchers during the difficult time. But the last step, and it was already built when we started to think to the program, it was already here. It is, what can we do when the country will recover, whatever the crisis is? What can we do to be sure that these people can come back to their country and continue the collaboration we had with them? So here we think about some mobility program, international collaboration, so the type of programs that we already know, but les pensées en avance just help us to consider that they will come back. So it's not about keeping the mind here in Canada, it's continue to develop the mind of these people, the work they can do, to be sure that they could rebuild their countries the time it will happen.
In a sense, Carole, what you're saying is, you know, to be straight and clear on what is the intent of a program, and to communicate this, because I think that you can be, you know, time bound, you know, for, you know, all kind of reason. But there might be other type of program that are more longer term, you know, and this is not at all a critique of here at all, not at all. It's about the diversity of way that we can support researcher in exile and their institution.
It's a diversity. It's about the length of the program, but you mentioned it. It is about to be very clear. Right. It's not to get the best, les meilleurs cerveaux, the best brains, and keep them, and how cool we we have them now and we will build something. I mean, for some of them could stay, and that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an immigrant.
Yeah.
So, and I
It's a
think
free
that
world.
why not? Okay, I hope. But it's really about people deciding what they want to do. But we need to build the bridge for them to come back. And here I have to say that the way we build programs is very important. If I have to redo it, I would like to have one scientific organization in the country which is in crisis and build this collaboration with this organization, just to be sure that we really have the bridge between the two countries.
Very interesting. Miria, I did not forget you. And, you know, I could do as for Carly, you know, your institution, you know, you're at UQAM. You can feel free to bring it into the picture. You know, are they doing enough? Have you been supported? Are you alone whatsoever? But, you know, talk about also your experience that you have with the scholar at risk. And what's this doing, you know, in lay term?
Bon, ben, je vais commencer avec l'UQAM. Alors, un peu comme Carly, heureusement, je travaille dans une institution qui est préoccupée par je dirais les enjeux sociaux, les enjeux d'actualité. L'objectif de notre département des sciences juridiques, c'est d'éduquer des juristes préoccupés par la justice sociale. Donc, au niveau institutionnel, je pense que je suis au bon endroit, à part peut-être le volet financier, mais bon, c'est une université publique, donc c'est très difficile de trouver les fonds pour faire des choses qui ne tombent pas directement dans notre mission. Donc, pour l'institution, je pense qu'il y a une belle... there's a nice level of awareness of the kind of issues that we're talking about. For the larger public, I'm not sure that that's always the case. I'm sure here in the room, everybody's like convinced that, you know, science and research is important. I'm not sure the larger public is, you know, always, how should I say, would always regard research as something that is worth protecting. You know, sometimes research is considered as something, you know, of a passion, almost like a hobby, you know. If you can't do research, well, just do something else or write about something else. And I'm afraid that's not how science works. And B, that's exactly what those who persecute, who threaten, who arrest scholars, that's exactly what they want, that you stop doing what you're doing. So I think there's some work to be done in terms of raising awareness as to why scientists or scholars find themselves in exile, that, you know, they have powerful voices, and usually they may use those voices to speak up for a greater good, to represent a larger public. And when those voices are taken away from them, when they go into exile and all of a sudden they're a nobody in a place they don't know, well, that means that, you know, the representation of that greater good, of that larger public, also fades away. So, yeah, I think we have to make it more well known, that inherent logic of why scientists are being persecuted. And maybe if we understand that, there will be more initiatives, more funding, specific immigration pathways, etc. Now, Scholars at Risk in particular, if I can just say a few words about that, Scholars at Risk is an international network of higher education institutions, mostly universities. It has more than 650 members in, I think, 46 countries right now. And what SAR mainly does is invite its member institutions to temporarily host scholars who are in danger or in exile. And I think the advantage of that is, first of all, it's easier to have such a big network behind this cause. It's easier to identify scholars. It's easier to find resources for those scholars. It's easier to exchange ideas, to exchange best practices, to find funding also. So it makes it easier to give a place to those scholars where they can continue their work. And I think SAR also makes it possible to show more solidarity within the academic community in favor of academic freedom, in favor of human rights, by hosting a scholar to signal, whether that is internally or externally, that as scholars we do not accept that our voices are taken away from us, that we show solidarity with other scholars that are in danger or in exile.
Merci, Myriam. Thank you very much. Now we're going to go to the last, round. You have all 3 minutes because, I want the audience to have the opportunity to ask you a few questions. Maximum 3 minutes. And, we've been talking a lot about, things that you have experienced. Now, tell me a little bit more about what should be the area we should be looking into, or we should be looking more into? Promoting diplomacy, participating in peace conflict resolution, supporting not only research institutions, I mentioned international collaboration in those situations of conflict, supporting the scientific in exile, we've talked at length, the education, the pursuit of development of capacity, the preservation, the maintenance of the scientific resources and the country of origin of the researcher that get destroyed often. How do we secure that we have some mechanism to avoid this? Supporting post-conflict research, ethic, responsibility, diversity of funding, the list goes on in that field. And NCA, I'll start with you with 3 minutes, in your perspective. And you are on the World Academy of Science, Science in Exile program. Tell us a little bit, what is the easiest things to fix and what is the biggest challenge?
I just want to emphasize that first we should know that what are the conflicts, because sometimes we don't even have the right definition for the conflicts. For example, in my case, when the protests happened, nobody considered it as conflicts, but thousands of the students lost their right for education. More than 700 faculty members get fired. So of course they are at risk now, but of course they cannot find a position for all of them. So first we should define the conflicts. I can even add that sanctions also could be considered as conflicts. Exactly today I was reading an article in Science regarding the situation of the Russian scientists right now during the war, that many organizations putting the Russian scientists under sanctions, not collaborating with them anymore. Even CERN, which is the symbol of the science diplomacy for us, saying that, okay, in 2024, we will ban our collaboration with Russian scientists. And imagine that this institute, which was the symbol of the science diplomacy, taking such kind of decision, imagine how the other organizations will be followed. I just wanted to mention that as a scientist, we should not have diplomacy in science. We should have a diplomacy for science. And unfortunately, these days, we see that with the conflicts. Unfortunately, even the scientific community following the decisions of the politicians, and they are not aware that they are losing their academic freedom. Because if the head of your university, the minister of your higher education, banning you to collaborating with a specific topic or even with a specific scientist, you are losing your academic freedom, and you will pay for that in future if you don't really pay attention to that. So first we should define what conflicts we are going to support, and if there are also conflicts, for example, like war that we know that happens almost everywhere, we should treat all the people equally. We should not just say that, okay, we have a budget for Ukrainians, but we don't have the budget for Afghanistan. We have, we should treat all the people equally, which makes me really sad, because after the collaboration with Science Style Project that we always have the funding problem, I realized that when the problem of the Ukraine and Russia happened, there was a budget for Ukrainians. And that's why the issue of the science and exile become really hot topic these days after the war. I'm somewhat happy because that's somehow gives awareness about what's happening. But I'm just worried that if the war stops, then we're going to be going to these projects that they're already on the table to help the scientists in exile. Are they going to be cut completely, or they are going to be devoted to the other problems or conflicts that are going to happen in future? And the other last point that I want to mention, that it's not just important to save the life of the scientists, it's also the preservation of science. which we don't really pay attention to that because we cannot help all the scientists in exile, but we can help science in general by preserving the infrastructures, libraries, and all these things that they are in the countries that they are on conflicts. This is the point that almost none of the organizations supporting the scholars actually is paying attention to that, and that's really important because the conflict will over. One day that everything will be over, but how that scientist will be able to come back home if there is no structure anymore to continue the science, and we are supposed to support that scientist forever because there is no lab, no institute, no research center to come back and do that science. Thank you.
Thank you, Ancien. Carole. Elle me regarde interloquée en disant pourquoi moi?
Pourquoi moi maintenant? Je pense que tous les points qui ont été mentionnés dans la question sont des points qui sont absolument nécessaires à tenir en compte si on veut si on veut être sérieux dans la façon dont on aborde la science en exil. Je vais y aller avec un certain nombre de points qui me paraissent absolument nécessaires pour lever les difficultés, avoir du succès, je ne sais pas comment le dire. Science en exil aujourd'hui au FRQ, c'est 35 personnes, étudiants, chercheurs, chercheuses qui sont soutenus, 2 millions de dollars investis. Puis il y a un certain nombre de facteurs qui font qu'on a réussi à faire ça. Premièrement, tout à l'heure, on parlait de la frilosité des universités. On a eu la chance de ne pas avoir une frilosité des universités. Et je pense que c'est très important d'avoir les universités comme des partenaires quand on accueille du monde, quand on maintient du monde, et quelle que soit l'origine de la personne qui est en exil et du scientifique qui est en exil, on a un certain partage de risques qui s'opère. On l'a dit avec les visas, avec est-ce que la personne va rester, pas rester, et le fait d'avoir le partenaire universitaire qui est engagé dans cette espèce de partage de risques ou d'incertitude est extrêmement important. So I think that the partnership with university is absolutely key if we want to succeed. Whatever the organization that we have to stay with our mission. On doit rester dans notre cœur de métier, c'est ce qu'on sait faire. We are facing the visa issue, even as a FRQ. I mean, we are not able to deliver visa. We know that it's really the key issue that we're facing. We can try to explain to some ministries, to some government, that when they were thinking to embargo about gas or oil embargo, maybe they should think about what they want to do with research. Could be a good idea, could make our job easier, but it's not our mandate to deliver this visa. So be very clear with this mandate that we may have. We have to pay attention that we cannot apply the same rules that we always apply. I put a lot of pressure with my team to find solution. We do not do as we always do. I cannot ask for some relevé de notes, okay? Most often people don't have them. So we have to be creative. We have to avoid the administrative burdens that normally we could face. So very important. And I mentioned in an ideal way have an organization in the other country to be in collaboration with, and prévoir le retour.
Yeah.
Really, prévoir le retour. Be sure that we help people to build this. We always talk about l'économie du savoir, and it's not only here, the économie du savoir, it's all around the world. So I will stop here.
And économie du savoir, the knowledge economy leads to the preservation of that knowledge. And Mirya, from a human right, do you think that this preservation of knowledge, this is one aspect that I know you're fond of, but, into the priorities for the future, where do you see this fitting, or are there other things that needs to be fitted?
Well, human rights, at their core, they're about humans, right? And the most important right is the human right to dignity. So I think whatever we do, it must never be to the detriment of human dignity. And that may mean very different things to different people. You know, you may have researchers in exile where science is what keeps them going despite all the hardships that they may endure, because doing research is also something, you know, we do by conviction, through a sense of urgency, I guess. And then you have other researchers in exile that, I guess for them, you know, science or research is only possible without hardship, because in order to think, in order to develop ideas, in order to discuss, you sort of need some peace of mind. So I'm afraid there's no one size fits all. I think the individual should be at the center of all our considerations. What are the needs of that person? How can we support that person going forward? And yeah, so I think it's an approach that is focused on the human being that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and the respect.
Exactly.
For the human being. Carly, I promise you, you were the one that spoke last in the first round. You speak last in the last round, and I promise you to come back to art and science. I don't know if you want to touch a little bit of this as an area that has a lot of space for making things better.
Yeah, and it fits with the priority area. So I was delighted earlier when science diplomacy was flagged as important. Because I think that we need to see the scientists in exile as part of the science diplomacy landscape. And I think it has to connect with Canada's responsibility globally, because Canada is a very privileged country that has to support a healthy global ecosystem. And we can't have that if certain people aren't allowed at the table, or if their research is dismissed or destroyed. And so one of the things that we do with the Royal Society of Canada, for example, with our program there, is we offer workshops, because what we don't want is colleagues to be brought into Canada to fail, where they come in and they get a placement, and it's similar to what you just said. They get a placement of 1 or 2 years, but they're often not given a proper welcome or communication about how the research ecosystem works in Canada, what's going to be expected of them, how it's different. And so the workshops that we give are actually peer-to-peer. They're professors to professors. And that makes a big difference, because colleagues tell me that it means that they're not infantilized, they're not treated like people who are not equal. And I think that that's an area that we really need to work on. If we are going to bring colleagues into Canada, it's the same in the UK, in the European Union. You have to be able to provide the support to set them up for success.
Yeah.
Because it goes back to the point about dignity.
Yeah.
And that is the main thing I think we all have to be concerned about with this.
Yeah. Good. Thank you very much. 16:30. I keep 5 minutes at the end for our panelists to wrap it up with one-liner. Time is for you. Any question, any observation, any comments? And there are 2 mics. And if there is none, you know, we can continue the conversation. Yes, please. And identify yourself and whatever affiliation you want to bring to the audience.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Oui, absolument. Allez-y.
Donc, je travaille pour un organisme subventionnaire de la recherche au Canada, mais là, j'aimerais parler à titre personnel. Je m'appelle Ija. Déjà, j'aimerais remercier les FRQ d'avoir ouvert cet espace de réflexion. Je trouve que c'est très important et très nécessaire. Je vais peut-être m'inscrire un faux par rapport à ce qui vient d'être dit, mais je le fais dans un esprit de respect et de réflexion collective.
Allez-y.
Donc, je pense que le travail que vous faites est très louable, que ce soit à l'ISC ou à l'UQAM ou bien au FRQ, avec ce programme dont je ne connaissais pas l'existence. C'est très, très important. Ceci étant dit, il y a déjà des années, dans une association scientifique à laquelle j'appartiens, on avait commencé à parler de cette initiative de Scholars at Risk. Certains et certaines d'entre nous avons décidé de ne pas y participer le temps et les ressources étant limitées, pour plusieurs raisons. La première, c'est que nous considérions à l'époque, je considère toujours, que cette approche, bien sûr, il vient répondre à un besoin vital, littéralement vital, de survie des gens qui sont en risque, dont leur vie est en risque. Donc c'est très important. Je ne dis pas que ça ne l'est pas. Mais ça établit en quelque sorte une hiérarchie dans la valeur de la vie humaine, comme si les scientifiques, les artistes parfois, méritaient d'être sauvés, dont leur vie vaudrait plus que celle d'autres personnes qui sont dans une situation de risque aussi. Par ailleurs, nous avons décidé de consacrer nos efforts plus tôt à nous assurer que dans les pays dits du Nord global, les droits des réfugiés soient respectés, parce que c'est un droit beaucoup plus vaste et plus égalitaire. Et donc, en fait, souvent, ce qui se passe avec ces initiatives, qui, encore une fois, sont très louables et très importantes, elles viennent dédouaner les États de leurs responsabilités en matière de droit international de droits de la personne. Donc, ça, c'est un autre élément important. Et le troisième élément, c'est que souvent, quand on mène ces discussions avec la raison humanitaire en tête uniquement, on oublie les enjeux géopolitiques. Et donc, ce qui se passe souvent dans des réseaux comme, je ne dis pas forcément celui de l'UQAM, mais celui que je veux dans mon association, c'est que les décisions étaient prises d'une manière très opportuniste parfois, répondant aux conflits qui étaient dans les journaux ce jour-là. Donc, ce sont des choix à géométrie variable. Et comme disait notre intervenante, qui je crois est en Allemagne, mais vient de l'Iran, on ne peut pas commencer à être sélectif par rapport à la vie des gens, laquelle compte plus que l'autre, surtout quand certains conflits ne sont pas reconnus. Donc, je suis née, j'ai grandi en Colombie, un pays qui a été ravagé par une guerre pendant des décennies. Avec le Canada, il n'y a jamais eu de problème parce que le Canada considérait que la Colombie était une démocratie. Or, souvent, ce qu'on évite de faire, c'est de parler en fait du rôle du Canada dans ce conflit, le rôle de compagnie minière canadienne dans ce conflit. Et donc, je crains que parfois, avec des initiatives qui se centrent uniquement sur la raison humanitaire, on perd de vue ce contexte géopolitique plus large. Donc voilà, merci.
Est-ce que vous avez une question?
Non, c'était plutôt c'est un commentaire.
Merci pour vos observations qui sont fort appréciées. Any reaction or comments to the observation that were shared by this person?
Maybe, oui, je vais rebondir sur ça. Premièrement, merci des commentaires, puis merci de le faire en tout respect. C'est jamais facile de regarder comment on va intervenir. Puis je vais réagir en toute humilité parce qu'on s'est demandé cette question-là. Je vais reprendre le dernier point. Pourquoi ce pays? Pourquoi un autre? Comment est-ce que ça s'inscrit? Je pense que c'est comme ça qu'on a migré assez rapidement en une année de quelque chose qui était très Ukraine, parce que c'était émotif à ce moment-là, dans un programme qui est devenu Science en exil, où en fait la ligne conductrice de Science en exil, c'est toute situation d'urgence. Puis toute situation d'urgence, ça devient une situation géopolitique, ça devient une situation de flux migratoire climatique, hein, c'est comme on l'a dans la face, ça devient une situation d'une crise environnementale qui peut arriver, peu importe. Et là, le partenariat devient comme le FRQ, la personne qui sollicite l'aide, l'université, son équipe d'accueil. Comment est-ce qu'on définit cette situation-là d'urgence? Donc, c'est pas idéal, mais ça vient répondre un petit peu à ce contexte que vous décriviez. Pour le reste, je partage. Les scientifiques, c'est pas mieux que les artistes, pas mieux que rien. C'est chacun dans notre métier, on essaye de faire ce qu'on peut.
Merci, thank you very much.
Est-ce que je peux juste dire un petit mot?
Myriam, Madame professeure Triche, il est tard, allez-y.
Il n'y a pas de problème. Vous avez tout à fait raison, les scientifiques ne sont pas plus importants ou plus importantes que d'autres personnes qui sont en danger. Mais le milieu, parce que Scholars at Risk, c'est un réseau d'universités. Alors, qu'est-ce que les universités ont à offrir? Bien, c'est le milieu universitaire. Donc, c'est là que le programme, disons, prend tout son sens, qu'on peut accueillir des personnes, tandis que on n'a peut-être pas le même milieu à offrir à, je ne sais pas, des personnes qui travaillent dans d'autres métiers. Alors, on fait ce qu'on peut dans notre milieu, mais ce n'est pas pour dire que les autres ont moins besoin ou méritent moins d'avoir de l'aide. Puis, des programmes existent aussi pour d'autres professions, mais il ne faut pas non plus mélanger, disons, réfugiés avec personnes en exil, parce que généralement, les personnes qui sont en exil ne veulent justement pas avoir ce statut de réfugié, parce que ça les empêcherait très probablement de retourner dans leur pays d'origine à un moment donné. Alors, de passer par le chemin des réfugiés, c'est souvent pas une option pour ces personnes-là. Et ils vont rester dans la situation, continuer à travailler dans des circonstances où ils sont en danger, plutôt que prendre le chemin de l'asile. Donc, c'est une option qui s'ajoute à d'autres, mais ce n'est pas pour dire que les autres méritent moins d'aide.
Merci pour ces précisions, Myriam. Madam, please.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you so much for esteemed speakers and moderator. Thank you so much. This is Sajal Zobi from St. Mary's University. I'm a co-leader of At-Risk Scholar Initiative from Global Link Academy. Actually, I wish I have time to go with you word by word, because I'm so interested in what you have actually examined and what you have explained. I really appreciate about mentioning this point in terms of dignity and in terms of solidarity, in terms of diversity. But I'm really wondering why no one mentioned the added value that those human beings, that those scholars, at-risk scholars, gonna add to the home country, to the host countries, to their home countries, and to the host countries as well, and to the neighboring countries, because they are international, they're gonna be international contributors. So that's what we can see from NCIA. NCIA, although the sanctions ban against Iran, and she proved herself as international scholar. So always that, it's the whole point is not about charity. It's not about that we get those scholars and put them here because we want to help them, but those scholars really can add value to the host communities, to the host institutions. But I really, really appreciate that you get this topic on the board, and I'm interested in this. I'm going to talk about this tomorrow.
I don't want to cut you short, but your question is a brilliant question, and why don't you ask the panelists? The question, why haven't you talked about, the benefit to the host country?
I'm sure they are aware of that, but usually it's maybe people don't mention this because they consider it that the humanity is most important than to mention something else. So they focus more on solidarity and diversity and humanity. But it's there are many. It's not NCIA only. There are many examples of this. And one point, last point.
You have one question, and you have about 24 seconds.
Okay, that's it. Because tomorrow I'm gonna talk about something relative. So.
My apologies. I'm looking at the time, and I've been asked to keep on the schedule, Madame. Je suis désolé. I'm really sorry.
No, I fully understand. That's okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your observation. Carly.
Yeah, Saja and I know each other really well, and it's the right question, and I absolutely agree. And I think in this moment, one of the reasons why we're involved in this, for me, it's nothing to do with charity. For me, it is making sure the global research ecosystem works. But also the work that certainly me and you and colleagues are involved with is to try to make sure there's space at the table for colleagues who have been excluded. So we can talk about EDI. This is a component of trying to make space for colleagues who would not be able to open any doors because coming into Canada, a completely new environment, a completely new research world, it's almost impossible to break through. And when I was working in Scotland, we had a colleague from Yemen. He didn't get any replies to his emails until he mentioned he had a mentor with the Royal Society of Edinburgh. And then all of a sudden, he got replies. So it's about opening doors and enabling space, and then colleagues can go and create their own opportunities.
Okay. One line.
May I add something to this question?
Ancier, go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Yeah. Actually, in the case of the integrity, there are also solutions for that from the beginning. As far as I'm aware, some of these scholarships that given or fellowships that were given to the at-risk scholars, in most of the countries, they are tax-free. This means that you don't pay for the pensions, you don't pay for the taxes, you don't pay for the health, because they give you as a, looks like somehow charity. And that the point is that imagine that you get this fellowship for 2 years and you cannot come back home after 2 years, but you are trying to find a solution to really find a job in that country. But the point is that you waste your time for 2 years because you stayed in academia, you saved your scientific background, but you don't pay for the pension, you don't pay for the taxes, and of course you cannot claim that you are part of this society if you want to become the citizen of that country. So you don't feel from the beginning that you receive that fellowship that you are part of this society. You say, okay, I'm just a guest here for 2 years maximum, because the most of the fellowships are just 2 years. And after that, I should leave because they don't want me, because they don't allow me from the beginning that I feel myself as part of the society. I'm not talking about the welcoming issue of the host institutes, how they can help you to find, flats, or having the mental problems. Of course, all these exiled scientists, they have a mental issue. Never really talk about these things, and I suppose that, okay, you saved your career, and of course you should work as a normal person, and they don't really realize that, okay, you lost everything in your life just because of decision, your family, your country, your home, your job, your friends, everything that you build up for years and years, and of course you are going to have a problem. That's why you cannot integrate in the society, because from the beginning the fellowship defined in a way that you cannot be part of the society later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ancier. Okay, the message to take home. What would it be from your perspective, Carole, for our audience? If not to take home, to take at the cocktail and pursue the conversation. Please.
OK, on est entre maintenant et le cocktail. Excusez-moi, puis je suis pas une bonne élève, j'ai 2 messages.
Allez-y.
Le premier, c'est je voudrais remercier d'abord. Je voudrais remercier toutes les personnes qui croient à des programmes comme Science en Exil. J'ai mentionné Rémi, mais il y a des personnes dans mon équipe. Je voudrais mentionner Marine, je voudrais mentionner Michael, je voudrais mentionner Isabelle, ils se reconnaîtront. C'est important de le dire parce que si ces gens-là ne transforment pas ce qu'on a dans les idées, ça ne marche pas. Ça, c'est point numéro 1. Point numéro 2, pourquoi on fait ça? Puis je pense que Carly, je pense que Myrial l'ont dit, tout le monde l'a dit. Je pense qu'on fait ça parce que la construction... et ça a l'air naïf, mais ce n'est pas naïf. La construction d'un pays, qu'il soit en crise ou qu'il ne soit pas en crise, passe par, à un moment donné, le niveau de formation, le niveau d'éducation de sa communauté. Puis pour nous, ça passe par la création, la formation d'une communauté scientifique forte. Alors si à un moment donné, on est un bridge dans cette communauté scientifique, ben, je pense que c'est pour ça qu'on fait ça, puis qu'on appuie ça.
Merci, Carole. Myria, tu vois l'horloge qui roule. Ton message.
Okay, 20 seconds. I think for me, the main barrier right now is immigration. Honestly, it's a nightmare to get a scientist in exile into Canada. And Ancier talked about this. There are countries like Germany that have federal programs with designated immigration pathways that come with funding. So I think Canada should take example on those countries, and maybe we have raised sufficient awareness for that to happen tonight.
Excellent, merci. Carly.
Merci. The only point I would make is if you are in a university and you hold a powerful position, speak to the person in charge who has the ability to offer placements to colleagues and ask them for longer than 2 years, because it's not enough.
Thank you very much. Ancier, you have the famous last word. What is the take-home message from your position, carrying, words from Germany, but also from the heart from your fellow Iranian scientists?
Just one sentence. Please keep science neutral without any border. Otherwise, we will not be able to help any conflict situation. Doesn't matter. It's the preservation of the science in any case, or the challenges that you are facing, or the issue of the at-risk scholars. Science should be kept neutral and should also treat all the scientists equally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, NCA. Ladies, gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention. This closes our panel on science in time of conflict and how to support and limit impact. I think you appreciate the conversation we had with our guests, panelists, NCA Erfen, Carly Koo, Myria Triche et Carole Jabert. Ça a été un plaisir pour moi d'être avec vous. Je vous souhaite une bonne soirée. Thank you very much.